All right, so after each storyteller, Kathy gets up and sings a song, and I usually tell you our mission statement for our event, which is VoiceBox. It's a story, it's a song, it's a celebration, it's a chance to be heard and hear about the human condition. It's the old school front stoop, it's the modern day confessional, where folks like us come to weave and unfurl and connect and dive into inspiration, where a story leads to a song and a song leads to a story, and the beat goes on and up and out, and your hands meet in appreciation, and your feet tap to the rhythm, and your heart pounds in anticipation for the chance to share your voice. And that's what we're hoping you'll do eventually. So share your voice. So we put our first-time storytellers up, and we have 3 first-time storytellers up that are coming up tonight. They're all exceptional. All the storytellers are exceptional tonight. But our first-time storyteller that's kicking us off is, oh, sorry. Hold on one second. I fuck up names really badly. And now I'm extra nervous because Ron's staring at me with Emily. And they're like, here she goes. Here she fucking goes. It's going to happen. They make me extra sweaty. Okay, Heather Yaeger to the stage.
Hello. I am dedicating this to my siblings who lived through this story, as well as my rock star children who came to watch, and they didn't have to. Thank you. He needed to die. With every breath he continued to take, his great big, beautiful, shiny star was being further extinguished. All the happy memories of who and what he once was replaced with sadness, fear, shame, and disgust. That strikingly handsome, brilliant, talented, charismatic person, in fact, no longer existed, replaced by a bloated, angry, irrational, and often delusional drunk. A phantom who would torment his children with inebriated phone rants and then not remember them. Their home was lost, the marriage over, the family unit decimated. The demons were winning. I'm the oldest of those 5 children, the one with the most memories, the good and the bad, and the one who bore the brunt of it for trying to protect my much younger siblings and my mother. I was also the most relieved when it happened. It was a gorgeous September day in the city, and we were celebrating our son's 11th birthday. It was a perfect day, happy occasion, yet I distinctly remember feeling inexplicably uneasy and drawn towards a warm ray of sunshine coming through the museum window. I walked over to the blinding swath of light to try and relax and to sort out my feelings, but I couldn't find any logical reason for how I felt. I had no idea that my father was leaving the earth at that very moment, with his usual flair. Or perhaps somewhere I did. When we returned home that evening, our answering machine was filled with multiple frantic messages from my 4 siblings. A veritable shitstorm of chickens running around with their feathers on fire and their heads chopped off. This was 2002, before the days of smartphones, when everyone relied on landlines. I had left my cell phone behind. I was with my husband and kids all weekend. I didn't need it. So in a nutshell, all 4 of them had called numerous times, screaming at me to pick up the phone. Because as the oldest, it has always been my job to fix the shit. I'm the fixer. I'm the fucking Ray Donovan of my family. The first several messages were from my sister Liz, who was a 22-year-old college student at the time, and on whose couch my father smoked his last Pall Mall filterless and proceeded to have a massive and decisive widowmaker. The paramedics were not successful in reviving him, so they took him to Cook County Hospital. Then several messages from the other 3 relaying the same story and screaming at me to pick up the phone, like I'm screening my phone calls and ignoring them. Those messages were followed by several more from Liz, who was freaking out because now the hospital wanted his body moved immediately, and she didn't know where or how to move a dead body. The final messages were from Krista, the sister closest to me in age, but furthest from me in every possible way by at least 2 galaxies. So with me out of reach, by default, the situation fell into Krista's lap. I love you, Krista. Krista is legendary for being painfully pragmatic. She's also cheap as hell. I love you, Krista. As such, she made the executive decision to have our father's body sent to a sketchy funeral home, close to his apartment, but not close to our homes. I don't know, because maybe A, it was cheaper, and B, in case he had a Lazarus moment, and maybe he wasn't dead after all and wanted to walk home. You never know. The next morning, a fat orange tabby cat was smugly holding court in the lobby of the tacky funeral home. It was quite content sitting in the sun, next to some faded fake geraniums. From the office area, we could hear the humming of a small motor punctuated by rhythmic hisses. I could feel that cat's luminous eyes boring right through us, with a little smug Cheshire grin, while I watched the dust motes dancing in the air. The whole scene was surreal. I swear we fell down a fucking rabbit hole. I wanted to slug Krista in the arm really hard for picking this creepy place. Soon a ghostly, frail older man appeared wearing a polyester, short-sleeved button-down shirt, complete with pocket protector, and a skinny black tie tethered to an oxygen machine, which explained the strange sound effects. He had a wispy comb-over, dyed black, who was wearing vintage glasses that were taped together over the bridge of his nose, like some kind of frickin' Buddy Holly zombie. I felt like we were in the waiting room at Beetlejuice. He ushered us in and proceeded to type up information on an actual typewriter from at least the 1980s. At one point, he asked if our father was a drinker. I answered that he was. But he had told Liz that same morning that he hadn't been drinking in a few days. There was a really awkward pause. And then Buddy Holly sighed and said, he had so much alcohol in his blood, you could smell it as he was being embalmed. His waxy pale face looked embarrassed, and I felt sick to my stomach. The oxygen machine continued to whir and hiss to fill the silence. We'd find out the full extent of his drinking the next few days as we cleaned out dozens of empty handles of gin, his favorite, from every cabinet and corner in his home. Would you like to see him? He asked. What an awful question. Who wants to see their father dead? A part of me felt like, no, I can't do this. This is not how things were supposed to go. Not here, not today, not like this. He was only 58. That's 3 years older than I am right now. He was supposed to get sober, get healthy, grow old, and retire in comfort. He was supposed to enjoy holidays and weddings and play with his grandchildren. This couldn't be real. I dreaded it with every fiber of my being, but I knew it was necessary. It sucks to be grown up. In keeping with the theme of the surreal tragedy, and also with the bizarre setting, he looked absolutely ridiculous. My father, Jim Cost, had worn his hair the same way his whole life. Parted on the left side, Fred Flintstone style, period. Buddy Holly had pomaded and slicked his hair back like John Travolta in Grease. That and all the heavy-handed pageant makeup made him appear to be ready to spring off the table any second for a rendition of Grease Lightning. We returned to the dusty office, a bit numb with shock. The undertaker had more bad news for us. Apparently there's a law in Illinois that if you haven't been under a doctor's care within the past year, the state requires an autopsy in order to issue a legal death certificate, which is kind of a big fucking deal in order to be able to close out accounts, collect insurance, transfer property, yada yada, and more importantly, to ship a dead body across the frickin' country for burial. To make matters worse, the autopsy has to be performed in the county in which the person dies. Buddy Holly's funeral home was not in Cook County, so the body would need to be moved back to Cook County for the examination. Are you fucking serious? This was turning into a game of hot potato, only the potato was our dad's body. As if this was the first time somebody had died in Cook County, the paramedics didn't know what to do. So they dropped him off at Cook County Hospital, who insisted he couldn't stay there. So then he was sent to Buddy Holly's funeral parlor, and now we were being required to send him back to Cook County, and then back to the funeral home, and we still had to figure out how the hell to get him across the goddamn country for a burial. At this point, I was starting to get pretty worked up and irritated. I can tell you how he died. It's not frickin' rocket science. Living on gin and 3 packs of Pall Mall filterless will do it. And why the hell didn't somebody figure this shit out before they shipped his body out of Cook County Hospital? I asked. Someone fucked up, big time. Buddy Holly could see things were breaking bad and decided to come up with a solution. He made a few phone calls and found a funeral home just over the county line where an autopsy would be done and a formal death certificate could be issued. Hallelujah. So, for a couple $1,000, Dad got to take a hearse ride to Cook County where someone would open him up and say, "Yep, heart attack." Afterwards, the body would be sent back to the Beetlejuice parlor in a double XL Uber Black until we could make arrangements to have his body shipped back via United Airlines in the first-class cabin down below to our tiny hometown, Wyoming, for burial in the family plot. Buckle up, we're in for a ride. Human beings tend to make 3 choices when managing expectations. They fear the worst and are often pleasantly surprised. They expect perfection and are usually disappointed. Or they just don't give a shit, and it is what it is, right? Unfortunately, I'm not the latter. Instead, I'm a sentimental perfectionist, so going back home turned out to suck, big time. They say you can never go back, and guess what? They're fucking right. I have a time limit here, so I will try to jam most of the juicy tidbits into a nutshell. So, where to begin? The 5 of us, along with our few spouses and partners, made the pilgrimage to our tiny hometown of Basin, Wyoming. Population 1,285, 30 miles to the nearest stoplight. We stayed across the street from our grandparents' teeny little white house in the Lilac Motel. It's the only motel. It has mattresses older than me, shag carpet from the Brady Bunch era, and the fragrance, not so much lilacs, but rather cherry Lysol. We ended up hanging outside our rooms, drinking, while various family members stopped by, like a hillbilly wake. Some of these precious moments from our time there includes cousins hitting us up for money, the pastor hitting us up for the opportunity to shoot an elk on our ranch, and the 20-year-old grifters Josh and Amber in the room next to ours hitting us up for cigarettes. They were being put up for the night by the sheriff for agreeing to get the hell out of Dodge permanently the next day. Amber had a hole in her throat from a recent tracheotomy, and she would squeeze it shut, like that, to keep the cigarette smoke from escaping. It was gross. And it was obvious that they had already experienced far more than their 20 years would suggest. At the visitation, which is what wakes are called in that part of the country, Aunt Hazel, Dad's younger sister, crashed through the door, ran to the casket, and flung herself across it, sobbing hysterically. To say she has a flair for the dramatic is an understatement. With a flourish, she pulled out a pack of Pall Mall filterless, and she tucked it into my dad's suit pocket, which she proceeded to borrow the whole afternoon until she had smoked every one of those, under the excuse of having one last cigarette with my brother. I hope he isn't looking for them in the afterlife. Dad's younger brother, the aptly named Uncle Dick, who had been sponging off of Dad for years, didn't even bother to show up. When we cleaned out Dad's place, which they had been sharing, we found a book next to Dick's bed titled How to Hide Your Assets and Disappear, along with brochures for private planes and luxury cars. Apparently, he was busy hiding other people's assets that he'd scammed from family and friends and was disappearing. My dear Grandpa Ned held Dad's cell phone, and tearily said, "Jim called me on this every single day." And then he tenderly tucked it into the casket. And after a few solemn moments, he started to turn, but hesitated. Then he pulled it back out, and he put it next to his own and said, very matter-of-factly, "It's a pretty nice cell phone. It's much nicer than mine. And a lot newer. I'm pretty sure he would want me to have it." And with that, he made a last-minute exchange, tucking his own cell phone into the casket and pocketing Jim's. Dad's best friends, the doctor, the judge, and the banker, all proceeded to get totally shit-faced. And after it was all said and done, we were ready to do the same. So we headed to the Smokehouse Bar. As we opened the creaky screen door, I had deja vu from the scene in Animal House when the kids walk in, the band stops, and all the patrons rubberneck to check out all the strangers. We hadn't bothered to change from the funeral, so in a sea of Carhartts, Wranglers, boots, and flannel shirts, we stuck out pretty bad in our long dress coats and city clothes. Things got only more uncomfortable as Liz proceeded to run the pool table and piss off a few drunk cowboys, who ended up being physically tossed out the front door and onto the sidewalk a la Clint Eastwood movie. I totally failed to recognize a few of my classmates, who in turn totally didn't recognize me either. After we were reacquainted, a girl I used to go to summer camp with awkwardly confessed, "We thought y'all was German tourists." That's okay, because I didn't recognize her either, and even though we were both 38, I could have sworn she was 45 or more. At that moment, I was no longer home. I had been in that bar hundreds of times in my youth, so many memories, yet now it felt like an alien planet. The reason I'm standing here right now is because my father refused to pay for my college if I stayed in Wyoming. He traveled the world in his youth and wanted his kids to see that there was a great, big, beautiful, fascinating world to discover. And he was right. Dad was far from perfect, but we all have the choice to see the light or the dark in people. I see my father in my son's hazel eyes, his inquisitiveness, and his vision. I see my father in my daughter's extraordinary charisma, quick wit, and fierce will. And thanks to him, I try really hard to see the humor in every situation, even one so dark as death. Family. Sometimes it's like a cozy campfire with hot chocolate and s'mores and kumbaya. And sometimes it's a shitstorm of insanity where they just burn the whole motherfucking house down. But no matter what, they certainly light up our life, don't they? Thanks for listening.